also allows us to press for two very specific amendments, which we could do, I think, when we get it through is a different matter. The first is to introduce a new offence that would allow for much tougher sentences and hit and run incidents where the driver leaves the scene and what we must have known or should reasonably have known was potentially a serious or fatal injury. And the second one is to close what is known as the exceptional hardship loophole, which we've all come across, which routinely allows convicted drivers to avoid a driving ban. Now we've got a series of speakers who, in advance, thanks everybody who has joined us. And there's not many of us here, but we will pass on what you've said because many of you have got first-hand experience with the problems that this causes. So our first speaker is Victoria LeBruck, who is Head of Policy, Campaigns and Communications from Road Peace, who's going to talk about hit and run and exceptional hardship. Victoria, are you going to have a go now and we'll see if we can hear you?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you.
Can you furthest away? Well, that's not, you don't want to hear me, Jenny, you've heard enough of me. You want to hear the presenter. You could come and sit here otherwise. Okay, right. Victoria, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to start off by talking about hit and run. I work for Road Peace, which is the national charity for road crash victims. We support people who have been bereaved or seriously injured in crashes. And we strongly believe that the justice system should mitigate rather than aggravate people's suffering after the worst thing has happened. You want to know that the justice system will deal with the incident properly. And hit and run is an issue that sees outrage in the media, and there have been a number of petitions to Parliament to address the injustice that people face. And we're in a situation at the moment with hit and run where families are not only not getting justice, but equally the charges available are an incentive to leave the scene. So people are being left to die by the side of the road where they could potentially have been saved if emergency services were called because of the charging system that we've got available at the moment. I'm sure all of you know this already, but if you cause a death or injury whilst driving, there's a range of driving charges in existence that are based on careless driving or dangerous driving. So that means that the manner of driving has to be proven. And there's lots of circumstances where that isn't possible, due to the police investigation or a lack of evidence. And in those situations where someone's been left to die by the side of the road, the only charge then available is fail to stop. And this charge is a summary offence. It's designed to be damage only. The maximum sentence for that is 6 months. And it also says to notify the police as soon as possible, but within 24 hours. So it's completely out of date from when it was first introduced in 1988, when mobile phones weren't really as prevalent as they are now. And it also means that drivers who are under the influence have got an incentive to drive away and sober up. And the situation as well that we're in now is that the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill kind of perversely is proposing to increase the maximum sentence for causing death by careless driving under the influence from 14 years to life. So we hold that leaving the scene needs to be addressed alongside this. It's a widespread problem. In 2019, there were 86 people that were killed in collisions where the driver left the scene. And really, we need a charge which separates the manner of driving from the crime of leaving someone to die, and also doesn't act as an incentive to leave the scene. So what we are proposing is a new charge for failing to remain at the scene of a fatal or serious injury collision, which would carry a 14-year sentence, and would also include a requirement for reporting to emergency services much more quickly. We are very lucky to be joined here today by David and Annalise Nicholas, who are going to speak about their experience. So I'll hand over to the both of you.
Thank you, Victoria. Before we hand over, other colleagues have joined us. We're having awful trouble with the sound today, and we're just using Adam's computers to speak. So if you can't hear it, I might suggest that you come a bit closer. I'm very sorry, but it's apparently all the bits of equipment have walked during the pandemic. You know, sorry, David and Annalise, which of you want to start? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. So we are the parents of Joseph Peter Nicholas, who was killed by a hit and run driver on the 19th of May 2018. Joseph was 23 years old when he died. We suffer daily with unspeakable grief after his death, and our hope in speaking to you today is that the law is changed to properly deal with drivers who leave a person to die by the side of the road. Joseph was walking home after a day out with his work colleagues. He was walking the 9 miles late at night and was struck as he walked along the verge of the A30 eastbound highway, taking his shortest route home. The driver made no attempt to stop and continued to drive for 11.5 miles to a service station, passing numerous safe locations to stop and inform the emergency services. 3 off-road safe locations within the initial 3 miles. Within the initial 2 minutes, the driver phoned his father rather than phoning the emergency services and made arrangements for 5 of his family members to congregate with him at the services 11.5 miles from the collision point and 17 miles from their home address. Having driven to the services, the family members met with the driver for 35 minutes before a 999 call was made to the police services, 58 minutes after the collision. The driver was then vague about the collision location. The result of these selfish actions was that Joseph was not located down a wooded embankment until nearly 2 hours after the collision. We will never know if Joseph could have been saved had he have been located within minutes rather than hours. And we don't know what may have happened to him whilst lying in a wooded area for 2 hours with little or no life. It causes us great pain to think of him lying there, and it is one of the worst crimes imaginable to leave someone to die alone when their life could possibly have been saved. We firmly believe that the driver's actions in fleeing the scene were based on a selfish, careless desire to fabricate a false story of his actions in killing Joseph. He claimed to be collecting his parents from a cycling holiday in a small 2-seater vehicle, 3 passengers with 2 bicycles and associated luggage. He claimed that his brother then collected his parents and transported them to the services, completing a 39-mile journey in 22 minutes, 28 seconds maximum, which equates to an average speed of 104 miles an hour. We believe that numerous lies were told to cover the true actions of the driver, accepted by the police with little or no investigation. In fleeing the scene, the driver's motive was to plan a version of events with his family to hide the truth and gain acceptance from the police. The only charge made against the driver months later, which was only made after our insistence, was failing to stop, to which the driver pleaded guilty. He was fined £126, a surcharge of £30, costs of £85, and driving record endorsed with 8 points. As there was a lack of evidence for the standard of driving which caused the crash, this is the only penalty that was available to charge the driver with leaving Joseph to die at the side of the road. The driver's selfish, careless action served him well in avoiding the truth about the events of that evening, events which should have resulted in a custodial sentence for causing death by careless or dangerous driving. But without the evidence for the way in which the man who killed Joseph was driving, this was not possible. We strongly believe that the law regarding failure to stop or report collisions involving actual or potential serious or fatal injury needs to change. Because in the case of Joseph's death, the driver claimed he panicked, and the police took matters in their own hands to accept this story, giving the driver a way out. If we had not complained and raised our voices, the driver would have received no charge. How is it justice that a driver received points on his licence and a fine for killing a human being and knowingly leave them to die? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very useful, and I'm sure people will make use of it when we get to the debate and talk about amendments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next, Victoria?
Could Adam please play the video pre-recorded from Lucy Harrison, who's also been bereaved, and then I'll talk about exceptional hardship, if that's okay.
What makes you think that this will work?
Okay. Can everyone see? No, you can't see that. No.
It's a parliamentary committee to deal with dangerous driving.
Oh, sorry. Can you help us with the speaker situation? That's not.
We know that the obviously that's maximum 6 months. I think it's hardly ever given that. So we do think it should be additional evidence. We also think there was time come forward but within 24 hours. And we need that is actually a loophole to drivers to be able to just kind of leave this in get clinical drugs out of the system and come forward and potentially only be charged with that rather than serious offence, which is really wrong. And we then also kind of have to additional message on specifically on drugs from the person in general. And that's that, when someone has been involved in an offence which carries a knowledge plan, it's ludicrous that they can just get behind the wheel of the car immediately and continue to drive. So it does to a kind of licensing additional licensing use. For us to be suspicion of offence like that has a license suspended. And so they're giving a whole the fact that, the driver was in his car yesterday continuing to drive that was awful and it actually kind of be a vehicle as well. And I kind of just want to see that change technology and obviously accident is used in kind of legal terms at the moment and it's just really inappropriate. When you drive away struck somebody that's not accidental, it shows on the street, it's not accidental, it's showing all that humanization of these questions change use and internal legislation updating. Thank you very much for Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
I think it's Mark, I think. Mark, are you there?
You're on mute, Mark.
I am. I'm just coming off mute. Can you hear me?
Oh, I think it's supposed to be Mark McGovern next, but it's up.
Mark McGovern.
All right. Well, I'll go back on mute.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I can't see Mark McGovern. There he is.
Yeah.
You have to unmute Mark. I have to unmute. Right, that might work. Can you try?
Mark? Is Mark speaking? Hello? Oh, that's great. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, you're on. It's your go. You ready? Mark?
I can hardly hear you.
You can't
Well,
hear
we can hear you quite well, so why don't you keep going?
Is that better, Mark? Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to start your presentation?
I can hardly hear anybody.
We can hear you though.
We can hear you very well, Mark.
Ah, right, I can hear you now.
Okay.
I just missed all that because of a technical problem, I guess. I don't know. Can you explain to me what you want me to say? I haven't actually prepared anything for this. I didn't really know. I presume you're talking about exceptional hardship.
That's
Hello?
right. Mark, I'll talk a little bit about exceptional hardship now, and then why don't you talk a bit about your experience, if that's okay, all right? We'll let you know. So we've just, all of us have covered talking about hit and run and the issues there. But the other issue that we're looking to gain support on is around exceptional hardship. Exceptional hardship is about justice, but it's also about prevention. Drivers who represent a serious danger to the public are being allowed to continue driving on our roads, and some of them go on to kill. Either they've reached 12 points or they've been banned for an offence that has a mandatory ban. But there are many cases where drivers are pleading exceptional hardship and being allowed to continue to drive. Cycling UK are investigating the scale of this at the moment, and they'll have data around it before committee stage. And what we can say is that exceptional hardship is being used in cases which definitely aren't exceptional. Of course, a driving ban causes hardship, but it should be the case that exceptional hardship is granted in a tiny minority of cases. We want the law changed so that exceptional hardship is only allowed in cases which are truly exceptional and would cause hardship for the large majority of drivers. So our amendment would change the legislation so that exceptional hardship is granted if and only if it is significantly greater than the hardship that would arise if the same disqualification were imposed on a large majority of other drivers. So Mark, if you can hear me okay now, if you'd like to talk a bit about your experience as to why exceptional hardship legislation needs to change.
Well, I mean, our story is our son Louis, who was killed nearly 3 years ago on his motorbike. He was going home from work, and he drove through a green traffic light, and the man in a red van who was driving the other way went through a red light and killed our son. He's now serving 7 years for causing death by dangerous driving. When we found out that the car behind my son had a dash cam camera in his car, and luckily, I suppose, we got some justice because it was used in court. When the police told us about the man who had killed our son, Kurt Salmon, his name was, they told us that he'd killed previously. Some years earlier, he'd killed a child on a zebra crossing in a hit and run. And I think, similar to the story we heard earlier, he didn't receive, I think he served a short prison sentence because the law was different then, but he had this offence of previously killing somebody. And he also had numerous other driving offences over the years, but a few months prior to him killing our son, is that he appeared at court with 12 points on his licence for, I think, using a mobile phone and driving through traffic lights. He claimed exceptional hardship and was allowed to keep his licence. So the magistrates could have stopped him driving, but they said that, that he should continue because I'm not sure of the reasons. I think it was something to do with being a carer for his mother or something like this. I tended not to want too many details of what had happened. And I've worked in the criminal justice system, but the people around me, when they heard that this man had killed before and he had license, they couldn't believe that he was allowed to continue driving when there was an opportunity to stop him. So, the court case went on for a long, long time, a number of years. It was only in July that he was eventually convicted after a trial. And I actually wrote to the magistrates court to find out a little bit more about why he was allowed to continue driving when he had this appalling driving record. And I've written to the minister and my local MP, and all they say is that it's in the hands of the court and it's to do with exceptional hardship. And I really couldn't believe that applied to this man, because there was no risk assessment done, as far as I could see, by the magistrates to decide whether it was safe for this man to continue driving. And I'm not even sure how much information they had about his previous driving record, because the the email from the clerk to the magistrates was fairly ambiguous about his endorsements, and I wasn't sure whether they would have known that he killed previously. So I didn't get a lot of information, but I was told clearly that there was no risk assessment undertaken when magistrates decide whether somebody should continue to drive. And the point that I made to the clerk, although I never got a response, was that courts send a message about what, obviously they punish people and pass sentences, but they also send a message about what's acceptable when it comes to reason, driving and behaviour on the roads, and obviously all sorts of other crime. And I thought somebody like the man who killed my son didn't take any notice of the law, because he had countless convictions for, I think, no insurance and driving through red lights and using his mobile phone. And I said, well, I thought that at least would be an opportunity, even if they banned him for a few weeks or a few months, to say your behaviour is unacceptable. But as far as he was concerned, the court said it's okay, you can kill, you can get loads of license points on your license, you can drive, and we'll still let you drive, because it might inconvenience you a little bit. And people like myself, actually I've got a clean license at the moment, but we worry about getting points on our license because we might get banned. If you get 12 points, you get banned. I've heard people say, I've got 9 points, I've got 6 points, I'm worrying about that. But what I found from this is that you can kill somebody, have a terrible record of driving, get 12 points, and the magistrates will still let you carry on driving, because you might be inconvenienced. Our son's dead, we'll never see him again, so that's inconvenience. I don't even think going to prison is an inconvenience now compared with that. It's all relative, isn't it? And having to take public transport, ride a bike, walk, it's not inconvenient, it's quite healthy. So I do think that the current situation with inconvenience is not fit for purpose, really. It's not a disincentive to accumulating points on your license. I think that's all I've got to say really on the matter. Okay.
Very interesting and very useful information for us, I think.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right, it's Mark Jones, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Lincolnshire and chair of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. Mark Jones, are you there? Yes, I see you.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. The exceptional hardship defence is an interesting one for me, because there's certain things you can use it for and certain things you can't, which I think quite clearly is not very equitable. So at the moment, you can use it for an accumulation of points, but if you get caught, for example, drink driving, I think most of us would think it reasonable that you can't use the exceptional hardship defence, and you can't. So you will lose your licence. Well, why is the hardship taken into account when you do a series of bad things on the road, as opposed to one thing on the road? They can all end up in killing somebody on our roads. And I find that totally inequitable. So on a personal level, I don't accept the hardship defence at all. I just think fundamentally it's flawed. That said, there are 2 people, I confirmed this with the policing minister yesterday, 2 people currently on our roads with 68 driving points who have managed to successfully plead hardship defence from the 12-point maximum up to 68 points and are still enjoying the privilege of driving on our roads. There is no defence that I can see for anybody to say that that's in a 3-year window, bearing in mind that within 3 years they have accumulated 68 points and still have the privilege of being on the road with you and I, with cyclists, with pedestrians, with equestrians. It's unacceptable. So I very much believe that there needs to be reform of the defence. The other issue that I've raised with the minister is that I think often, as we say, justice delayed is justice denied. And one of the things that I think can be simplified to reduce pressure on courts, to send a clearer message to people, is around drink driving. We know very well that when evidential breath tests are carried out on the day, usually the evening of the offence, that it will take many months before that offence gets to court. And in the meantime, people remain able to drive, even though we know that they will ultimately be taken off the road. So the question I raised was, would it not be better to have a summary option available that actually people could submit to there and then, give up their license, accept some points and a fine, because we know that's where it's going to go. They're instantly off the road, because several months later when it goes to court, that individual may have changed their life. They may have a new job. There could be reasons why actually they've learned their lesson. And so I believe that we would deliver a better level of service to the public, a better outcome for the individual, and ultimately a lessening of pressure on our courts if we were able to have that as an option. And that's something I've urged the Minister for Policing to consider, which he seems keen to do. There was a review, and is a review going on into roads policing at the moment by the government, and the APPGCW are fully engaged in that. And that led to a survey being conducted by the APPGCW, a national survey, where we had, I'm just looking for the number, it was around 70,000, 66,266 unique responses to it. And the vast majority of the people were saying, 78% said that they saw road traffic offences on a daily basis. 7 of 10 respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that fixed penalty notices to road traffic offences such as speeding, failure to wear a seatbelt and others should increase in line with serious offences. And that actually the fines that obviously at the moment go straight back to Treasury, it would make sense to leave the money going to Treasury so they don't lose out. We need our Treasury to be funded, but the uplift in the fine should then be used to actually be ring-fenced to tackle education, enforcement, and engineering issues on our roads to make them safer and more appropriate for all. I think there's a huge amount we can do to keep our communities safe. But genuinely, if we were killing and seriously injuring the number of people that we do on our roads through anything else, we would be throwing the kitchen sink at resolving it. If 2,000 people a year died in our country because of domestic burglary, quite rightly, I'd be getting leaned on very heavily by the Home Office to say, how much money do you need to make this stop? And that is sadly not the case with roads. So we have to do what we can with what we have. We need more roads policing. We're delivering that through the APPGCW, working with Chief Constables, but we do need the legislation to be appropriate. And I think the hardship defence, sadly for me, is not one that is defensible.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. I think I have to agree with you. We'll see what we can do when the legislation comes next week. The final person to speak before we have a discussion is Roger Gavin, who's Policy Director of Cycling UK. Is there, Roger? I think you are.
Yes. Can you just confirm you're hearing me loud and clear?
You've got 5 minutes. Okay,
right, and plenty to cover, so I'll try and be brief. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for inviting me to speak. We as stakeholder groups, so that's Cycling UK, British Cycling, Living Streets, Road Peace, Road Danger Reduction Forum. When this bill was going through the Commons and member attended the Commons very suddenly and very unexpectedly, we rapidly got a script together because we've all been concerned for a very long time about the government's failure to carry out a full review of road traffic offences and penalties. They promised to do that back in 2014, and yet what came forward in the bill was some very limited measures, increasing the maximum sentence for causing death by dangerous driving from 14 years to life, introducing a new offence of causing serious injury by careless driving, 14 years to life, not only for causing death by dangerous, but also for causing serious injury while under the influence. On their own, those seem perfectly reasonable things, but actually, without wider changes, they could in fact be counterproductive. Because at the heart of this is a fear that the distinction between careless and dangerous driving is unclear and inconsistently applied. Now, this is one of several things that we want clarified as part of that wider review of road traffic offences and penalties. There are plenty of others which I'm not going to be able to discuss. I'll just merely list some of them. The point that Mark Jones has just been talking about interim driving bans. I hadn't thought of it as a sort of summary disposal, but if somebody is charged with an offence for which carries a mandatory driving ban on conviction, why not impose an interim ban pre-charge? A lorry driver named Robert Palmer killed 2 cyclists who were taking part in the charity bike ride from Land's End to John O'Groats. He had committed another serious injury, but also by driving into the back of someone before his prosecution for the fatal offence even got to court. That too could have been offended by using interim driving bans. So there are several things like that we would also want as part of a wider review of traffic offences and penalties. The 2 that we've highlighted that Victoria has talked about are things that we think could stand on their own and are fairly uncomplicated to introduce straight away. The others would probably take more consideration, more consultation with other legal bodies. And therefore, the key thing is at this stage in advocating for all of this is to seek a ministerial commitment through legislation if need be to carry out that wider review of road traffic offences and penalties that was promised back in 2014. At the heart of it, as I say, the most important and perhaps the most complicated bit is this issue of clarifying careless and dangerous driving, and at the same time to place much greater reliance on driving bans rather than necessarily custodial sentences as a sentencing option. I just need to make it clear right from the outset that seeking to clarify careless and dangerous driving is not about wanting more drivers locked up. It is much more likely in most cases to be about making sure that they are banned, because someone who has driven dangerously may not be a dangerous person who needs to be locked up for public protection, but they do need to be taken off the road for public protection. There will be other cases where somebody is more obviously reckless or is a repeat offender where they clearly do need to be imprisoned because nothing else is going to stop them getting back behind the wheel. But if we were making greater use of driving bans rather than prison sentences, then it would stop one of the likely causes of why it is that it seems to be so hard to persuade jurors to convict for dangerous driving in the first place. They see they're being asked to consider whether the driving that the driver is accused of fell below, which is careless, or far below, which is dangerous, the standard of a careful and competent driver. Now, how do you distinguish between below and far below? And what is the standard of a careful and competent driver anyway? We suspect that a lot of jurors are thinking, I'm a careful and competent driver. The person in the dock did something that I can sort of imagine doing myself in a moment of inattention. I don't want to send them to prison. We don't know that that's what they're thinking. Okay, Tony, thanks. We don't know that's what they're thinking because we're not allowed to research this stuff. But if the definition was clear and they knew that that doesn't necessarily mean that the driver is going to go to prison, then the legal framework is much more likely to work as intended. As things stand, there are huge inconsistencies, both from one year to the next and from one part of the country to the next, as to who gets how many convictions are for careless, prosecutions and convictions of careless, and how many for dangerous. And that just needs much clearer definitions. We have a proposed definition. We advocate that please do table this and various other amendments that we have lined up. But at the heart of this, what we really need is that commitment to the wider review of road traffic offences that would allow us to sort this and several other issues out.
Thanks, Roger, very much indeed. In terms of, it's an opportunity now for colleagues here to question any of the speakers if we can make the technology work. But
what's going to have to happen is that they'll have to ask the question. You'll have to repeat it.
You'll have to ask the question, otherwise you've got to. I'll repeat it unless you want to come and speak into the thing yourself. But we will give these groups your email addresses so they can send you things direct if you'd like it, and any other links. And that's the, I think anyone else who asks for it, it'll be there. Roger has already done a briefing, but and that'll come round. That's why I got your email addresses. But anybody want to ask a question now and see if we can make it work? What? Diane Hayter.
Yeah.
Well, much better.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's partly because I've got to go to another meeting. I had only come to talk about what to ask about one thing, which is drinking and driving. but actually I've been so interested by the other stuff that I'd be happy to do some amendments on that too. I'm just interested that the bill, from my point of view, welcome that it will increase from 14 years to life for causing death by, I think it's dangerous driving. But it doesn't do the same for causing a serious injury or something like that. And I wonder, those who's been involved with the bill, why that is, and whether we could add a similar increase for the lesser, if you like, not that it doesn't kill someone where drinks involved. And I'd really like to do an amendment. The problem is, until I got this email, I knew nothing about this bill as far as drink drive goes. All right, and so I'm not down to speak on Tuesday, but I'm still really keen to do this if people can help.
Can you look at that, Roger, and come back to us?
Yes, thank you. Just to say that that is indeed one of our other proposals and one of the amendments we were asking to have tabled in the Commons, and we have drafted an amendment to exactly that effect. You're absolutely right. One of the reasons why we suspect the court that the proposed increase from 14 years for causing death by dangerous, the courts don't go anywhere near the existing 14 years because they're mindful that causing serious injury by equally bad driving, the penalties would be so much less. And if the gap opens up, as you rightly said, from life sentencing, if the dangerous driving causes death, but merely 5 years if the equally dangerous driving happens to maim but not kill, the courts are going to be incredibly reluctant reluctant to go anywhere near 14 years, let alone life sentences. So you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that the penalties for serious injury do not end up even further behind those for equivalent causing death offences.
Mark James, do you want to say anything? Mark James. Is he there?
Well, yeah, he's
I'm here.
Do you agree, or anything you want?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Have you got anything to add to what Roger said in reply to Baroness Hayter?
No, I'm conscious of your time. There was nothing that I've just heard that I disagree with, so I will add no more.
Fine. Anyone else got a question? Do you want to come here?
Oh, yes. Right, okay. It's Nushina Mubarak. It was the point that Roger made about asking for a wider review of road traffic offences, and I think that is so important because it's not just about, it's also about bicycles as electrically powered vehicles, basically, which a lot of them are scooters. They pose such a danger to pedestrians, and you see every day an accident waiting to happen. So it's about all kinds of, it's about dangerous driving, it's about a multitude of things. So I believe it really does require a much wider review of where we are with how the roads are managed for the safety of everyone that uses them.
Roger, would I come back or Mark?
Yes, very happy to respond briefly. Absolutely. Cycling UK, we are not in the business of defending irresponsible cycling. We absolutely accept that the law needs to apply in a consistent way, regardless of how one's using the road. Irresponsible behaviour on the road is unacceptable, regardless who is doing this. And we regularly we regularly agree violently with the motor organisations on exactly that point, often to the dismay of media interviewers who've set us up to have an argument, and only for them to find that actually we're completely on agreement on this on these issues.
All right. Baroness Hodgson. Musical chairs, isn't
yes,
it?
I know. Hello, I'm Fiona Hodgson, and can I begin by extending my heartfelt sympathy to those who've lost children. I cannot think of anything worse to happen, and my heart goes out to you, and I also commend you for the bravery of speaking about it. It must be incredibly difficult, and I admire you enormously. Of course, hit and run is a terrible thing, and we need to have the right measures in place to deal with it. And I absolutely agree with that. But I would also like to pick up on what my colleague, Baroness Mubarak, has said. And one of the things that I think, you know, especially here in London, is that there are many more cyclists on the road now. And whereas there is a lot of policing that concentrates on car drivers, there appears to be almost none that concentrates on cyclists. And if you want to see road traffic offences, you only have to go and stand outside Parliament, where regularly there are bicyclists going through red lights. I myself have been knocked over by them, nothing happens. A friend and colleague of mine was knocked over 2 weeks ago by somebody going through a red light. She's elderly, she's in hospital. Because there is no way of identifying bicyclists, the bicycle did stop, but gave a false mobile phone number. And she is going to have months and months and months of rehabilitation. She's 89, she was very active. She's one of the, you know, real campaigner, but, you know, there is a question on whether she's ever going to lead a full life again. So I do think, I absolutely back up what my colleague Baroness Mubarak has said, that there appears that there is no offence of careless and dangerous bicycling. And the police need to also, I mean, I know that I'm a driver and a pedestrian. I'm also, you know, people in our household cycle. And the roads will only be safe when everybody obeys the laws. And everybody has regard to ensuring that people, you know, obey the same set of laws, because some of the accidents in London happen because bicyclists just ride across people, and you know, or ride up the inside, or you know, and this is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. So we need to make sure that everybody using the roads uses them responsibly and has regard for other road users, because I don't think most drivers would, you know, it's their nightmare to hit somebody. I know we've heard about some very reckless and clearly less careful drivers this afternoon, but you know, I make a plea because I think that certainly people are suffering from irresponsible cycling, for which there appears to be very, very little policing. Thank you.
Good point. Roger, do you want to respond?
Okay, well, let me partly start by reiterating what's said earlier. We're not in the business of defending irresponsible cycling. You know, we any more than you would expect the AA or the RAC to be defending irresponsible driving. We want to see more roads policing. We were among the many respondents that Mark talked about earlier, responding to that roads policing review. We really want to see more roads policing, because cyclists are far more likely to be the victims than the perpetrators of crime. That is actually true for pedestrians who get injured by red light jumping vehicles. In London, 96% of the pedestrians injured by a vehicle jumping a red light are injured by a motor vehicle jumping a red light. 4% are injured by a bicycle jumping a red light. Even on the pavements, it's 98% motor vehicles who've injured pedestrians on the pavement, not bicycles. That is not to defend the cyclists who do those things. It is just simply to say that road policing, you're absolutely needs, with finite roads policing resources, and I wish they were much greater, they do need to concentrate on the real sources of danger. That is sometimes irresponsible cycling, but most of the time, actually, most fatal and serious injuries are caused by collisions with motor vehicles, and speeding and mobile phone use and failing to look at junctions are every bit as likely to be, you know, there is no evidence that cyclists are either more or less responsible than drivers. So please, this is where we agree so strongly with the motoring organisations. It's irresponsible road use that matters, whoever is doing it, and policing needs to concentrate on the greatest sources of danger. But for the purposes of this bill, we need to make sure that the penalties are in place where irresponsible behaviour occurs, whoever it's from, and that does include irresponsible cyclists.
I think my comment on this, There is also the which will come in as well. I think we better leave that. Does anyone else want to make a comment, Jenny? Yeah. Sort of blinking here. Baroness Randerson.
Thank you. Well, my point in supplementary to what has just been said is that we're embarking on a whole new era of problems. One of them is e-scooters. The others will be e-bikes as well, which are able to consistently go very much faster. And my view on scooters is that the government, by setting up so many, nearly 40, I think, experimental trial areas, without having the legislative framework to make them safe, has really opened up a can of worms, because from the public perception, they are now effectively legal. The police, as you say, ignore breaches of any basic safety issues there. And there are no simple safety measures there, like maximum speeds, use of registration, minimum age, and helmets. And if the system of experimental areas had that framework, it would have been a very different thing. But at the end of their experiments, we know they're going to be made legal because the government's done far too much to stop now. But they haven't provided the restrictions that are needed, and it's going to be very difficult to enforce them when inevitably they have to come, because people are being injured by them and people are dying.
There's a million of them have been sold in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're sold without proper instruction about what you should and shouldn't be doing.
Right. Ian, you got the edge? I think. Well, you have to come down here.
I think we have to focus on. Sorry, I'm Ian Austin, member of the House of Lords.
Former joint chair of the all-party cycling group 100 years ago.
I think we have to focus on what the greatest risk is on the road. And it seems to me absolutely clear that pedestrians are much more vulnerable and much more at risk from irresponsible driving than they are from, I mean, of course, I'm a driver and I'm a cyclist, and we've all got to obey the rules. And as Roger has said, everybody should obey the rules and behave responsibly on the road. But people are much more at risk from irresponsible drivers than they are from irresponsible cyclists or people using scooters. And I think, Roger, it'd be quite useful. I mean, you talk in percentage terms, but can you just set out for us the numbers of people that have been injured or killed by cars or by motor vehicles as compared to cyclists? And let's get this, if we're talking about what we can do to prevent people being injured on the roads, you know, let's talk about what the sort of greatest risk is really and what we can do about that. I think you're on mute.
Yes, so I was trying to recall the figures that you need. I may have to circulate these afterwards to give definitive figures.
Well, roughly,
there are around,
in the order of what?
There are around 17 to 1800 deaths per year on the road. Of those, around what's about 40%, so involve around 50% involve pedestrian cyclists or motorcyclists from memory. Nearly 90% of them involve a motor vehicle killing a more vulnerable road user, a motorcyclist, or most about 90% of the deaths involve a motor vehicle, and about half of the victims of fatal collisions are vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists or motorcyclists. That's just broad order of magnitude. I can provide more definitive figures.
Sure.
So the question of what kills whom, there is a recent report by the PACT, Parliamentary Advisory Council on Transport Safety, that looked in detail at this whole question of what kills whom, and came to exactly the same conclusion you just outlined there, that you know, there is a huge inequality of arms, if you like, between which vehicles do the killing and which road users get killed.
Right. So it's not the case then that cyclists present this huge risk. I mean,
absolutely not. Even after allowing for the difference, even after allowing for the fact that there are more the risk of a car killing someone per mile travelled is still significantly greater than the risk of a bicycle killing someone per mile travelled. So equalising for differences of use, motor vehicles impose much greater danger, and lorries obviously increase much greater danger of fatalities, although actually they have a lower risk of being involved in serious injuries, which says something about the fact that actually most lorries are very well driven, but if they do hit you at all, they're very, very likely to kill.
Thank you.
I think we should call this meeting to a close. Thank you all for coming. You know what the second reading is, and after that we can talk about amendments, or we'll get all the briefings you can, including hopefully answers to Ian's questions and your questions and everyone else. Okay? Thank you very much for coming. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, that's remote training.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Can you thank them?
Yeah. You want to...
Well, thank you all for joining us on the remote. It's been very complicated here, and it's probably been very frustrating for you to sort of sit and watch and wonder what we're up to. But it's actually been very useful, and we've had a number of peers here who I think will be speaking on a variety of views. But I think it's terribly important that you've given us your experiences and your views, and anything else you want to send in, anybody do, you know. We can help you with names and everything else, Adam or Roger or I. But thank you all for sparing the time and for your interest, and you know, good luck everybody. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks around.
Thank you.
Best wishes around.